It's Thursday, September 15. In the headlines, Prime Minister Andrew Holness of the island. An update on the Alternative Dispute Resolution campaign. Regionally, cost of living crisis in the Caribbean. And in sports, West Indies squad named for the upcoming International Cricket Council's Men's T20 World Cup. This is the news on PBC Jamaica. I am Simone Absalom Gale. Minister of Education and Youth Favour Williams says early education institutions have completed an assessment of all 4-year-old students. Speaking at a recent Office of the Prime Minister face-to-face town hall meeting, Minister Williams explained that an assessment was not done during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic.
And so I am very happy that we're able to do this now. Many commendations to Mrs. Deslandes, Executive Director of the Early Childhood Commission and her team, and Dr. Sams Vaughan and her team.
She says the information will help to assess students' learning and behavior patterns.
The information that we will get will let us know precisely each and every child that is having problems with early reading and early numeracy, and are having issues with behavior. We don't yet have the results, but in a pilot study done some time ago, we know that approximately 30% of our children have issues with reading and numeracy by the time they are 4 years old. We can intervene with those children starting at age 4 and continuing with them through primary school. I'm sure you can see how we can begin to dramatically address literacy and numeracy in our schools over time.
The assessment tool was developed and first administered collaboratively in 2016 by the Early Childhood Commission and the Students Assessment Unit in the Ministry of Education to identify weak areas and undertake remedial interventions, as well as make referrals for physical and emotional challenges displayed by the children. Meanwhile, the minister says her team is also looking at benefits for teachers and their qualifications. She says they're also looking at the report from the Jamaica Education Transformation Commission.
And in that report, there are well over 150 recommendations. Yet, actions need to be guided by correct information.
She was speaking at the latest OPM face-to-face town hall meeting focusing on education. It was held under the theme, Education, Time for Action. Prime Minister Andrew Holness left the island on Wednesday, September 14, 2022 to visit the United States and the United Kingdom. According to the Office of the Prime Minister, he's on a working visit to Boston, Massachusetts, where he will be participating in a conference at the invitation of Harvard University. From there, he will head to London to attend the funeral service of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. Prime Minister is also scheduled to participate in the 77th United Nations General Assembly. Prime Minister Holness returns to the island on Saturday, September 24, 2022. During Prime Minister Holness's time away from the island, Dr. Horace Jang, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of National Security, will lead the government. More Jamaicans will learn about the Ministry of Justice's Alternative Dispute Resolution programs. You should know that they are offered free of cost to the public. Portfolio Minister Deroy Chuck gave an update on the public education plans during the sitting of the House of Representatives this week. ADR programs include restorative justice, child diversion program, and mediation.
Most cases, Madam Speaker, physical abuse and emotional hurt are between parties well known to each other. Domestic abuses and violence are at epidemic proportion. Violent conflicts in schools and communities are occurring daily. These acts, Madam Speaker, sometimes rise to the level where criminal charges are brought and persons prosecuted, which seriously damage relationships, cause bitterness to linger, and sometimes lead to reprisal.
He says for the period January to July 2022, a total of 8,025 new and follow-up clients have been seen.
Those referred by the courts constitute 78% of the cases. Madam Speaker, of the approximately 6,000 cases referred by the courts, 93%, Madam Speaker, 90+% were successfully completed. And along with the referral from the community and recommendations by the police, the overall success rate is approximately 80%.
The ministry is also conducting training to increase the number of restorative justice facilitators in order that every parish will have trained personnel in restorative justice principles and to be available for restorative justice circles.
RJ circles, Madam Speaker, are the mechanisms that enable parties to meet and settle their conflicts. Madam Speaker, it is important that RJ should be available in every corner of Jamaica. And this successful mechanism should not only be known, but should be utilized. Amazingly, Madam Speaker, while we have not been able to fully educate all Jamaicans about RJ, other countries are aware of the success of our program. Indonesia, Nigeria, Australia, and a few other countries are in touch with us. Indonesia, in fact, Madam Speaker, proposes to send a 15-member delegation to Jamaica to get a first-hand look at our program.
Minister Chuck reiterates that restorative justice circles are the mechanisms that enable parties to meet and settle their conflicts.
With so many disputes, disagreements, and conflicts simmering across neighborhoods, communities, schools, and homes, we need to find ways and means to get the parties to a restorative justice center. By reaching out to the churches, Madam Speaker, the Ministry of Justice hopes that more matters of abuses, harm, and wrongdoing can be referred to the restorative justice centers where the parties can get together to find healing and forgiveness.
Mr. Chuck has maintained that increased use of these interventions would help in reducing thousands of backlogs in the courts. He believes that increased use of ADR services to resolve simple cases and family matters would enable the courts to focus on civil and criminal matters. World Health Organization Chief Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus says the world is in a position to end the COVID-19 pandemic. Addressing reporters at a virtual press conference Wednesday, the WHO Director General delivered his most optimistic outlook yet on the health crisis that has killed almost 6.5 million people worldwide.
We're not there yet, but the end is in sight. A marathon runner does not stop when the finish line comes into view. She runs harder with all the energy she has left.
The WHO says deaths from COVID-19 last week were the lowest since March 2020. Despite this, Dr. Ghebreyesus is urging countries to remain vigilant.
If we don't take this opportunity now, we run the risk of more variants, more deaths, more disruption, and more uncertainty. So let's seize this opportunity. Today, WHO is releasing 6 short policy briefs that outline the key actions that all governments must take now to finish the race. It's a summary based on the evidence and experience of the last 32 months of what works best to save lives, protect health systems, and avoid social and economic disruption.
The Jamaica Defence Force will be conducting training exercises in the community of Seaforth in the parish of St. Thomas over the period Thursday, September 15, 2022 to Friday, September 16, 2022. Training commences at 8 p.m. to 5 a.m. The JDF is advising residents that there is no need to be alarmed by the presence of the soldiers during this exercise. There will be no explosions in the area that will pose any danger to lives or property. In the event that there are any concerns, they're asking that you report it to the JDF headquarters at telephone number 876-926-8255. 876-8121-9. That's 876-926-8121-9.
Motorists will pay slightly more for gasoline today as Petrojam has announced that 25 cents will be added to the prices of gas, putting 87-octane gasoline at $197.41 per liter and 90-octane at $201.39 per liter. Automotive diesel oil will go down by $4.50 to sell for $229.26 per liter. Continuing with a $4.50 decrease, ultra-low sulfur diesel will sell for $236.25 per liter. Kerosene will increase by $2.57 to sell for $214.88 per liter. Propane cooking gas will see a decrease of $1.54 to sell for $66.11 per liter, and butane will move down by $2.13 per liter to sell for $73.13. Remember that marketing companies and retailers will add their own markups to these prices. Cygnus is hosting an alternative investment summit on September 22, 2022. The conference, dubbed Cygnus Day, will be held under the theme The Emergence of Regional Alternative Investments in a Hybrid Format. Participants will be invited to explore the dynamic world of alternative investments and how they can enhance growth for their businesses and their investment portfolios. For your market updates, in foreign exchange trading for Wednesday, September 14, the US dollar sold for an average of $153.50. The Canadian dollar ended trading at $117.38. The pound sterling traded for $178.52, and the euro sold for an average of $157.13. In JSE trading, the JSE index advanced by 125 points. The junior market index advanced by 11 points. The combined market index advanced by 217 points, and the all Jamaican composite index advanced by 21 points. Overall market activity resulted from trading in 105 stocks, of which 55 advanced, 37 declined, and 13 traded firm. Stocks advanced for 138 Student Living Jamaica Limited, 138 Student Living Jamaica Limited Variable Preference, and AMG Packaging and Paper Company Limited. Stocks declined for 1834 Investments Limited, Barita Investments Limited, and Berger Paints Jamaica Limited. Trading firm were Community and Workers of Jamaica CCU Deferred Share, Dollar Financial Services Limited, and Equity Line Mortgage Investment Corporation Preference Shares. The overall volume leaders were Jamaican Teas Limited with over 4 million units, Cargo Handlers Limited, and Carreras Limited with over 3 million units. In regional stocks, in Trinidad and Tobago, Clico Investment Fund was the only active security posting over 6,000 shares. On the Barbados Stock Exchange, Goddard Enterprises Limited traded 25,000 shares. In regional business, the International Air Transport Association (IATA) warned Caribbean destinations on Wednesday about the price of travel. IATA Vice President for the Americas, Peter Serda, says taxes and fee charges pose a problem for travel to the regions as they make up a significant portion of a ticket price.
The taxes and fees that are added to the airline tickets substantially increase the cost of travel to and from the region. And you've heard me many times say this, particularly about this region. When we look at the global level of taxes and charges around the world, the average is about 15% of the ticket price. If I was to ask you, what do you think it is here in the Caribbean, what would you say? It's 30% of the ticket price. Even more, in some markets, taxes, fees, charges can make up almost half the ticket price. On a flight from Barbados to Barbuda, taxes and fees represent 56% of the ticket. Bahamas to Jamaica, 42%. And St. Lucia to Trinidad and Tobago, 42%. But when we look at a trip from Lima, Peru to Cancun, Mexico, another beach destination and a head-to-head competitor of yours, the taxes and fees represent only 23%.
He says that today's travelers now have choices and warns of the repercussion.
Today's passengers have choices, and as the total cost of vacations increasingly becomes a decision-making factor, governments must be prudent and not price themselves out of the market.
In market data for oil prices fell more than 1% as expectations of a weaker demand and a strong US dollar ahead of a potential large interest rate increase outweighed supply concerns. Brent crude was down $1.38 to $92.72 a barrel, and West Texas Intermediate crude fell $1.17 to $87.31. And that was the business report on PBCJ. I'm Denita Rodney.
In regional news, the Caribbean is in a cost of living crisis. According to the latest figures from the Caribbean Food Security and Livelihood Survey report, persons in the region who are still heavily affected by the global COVID-19 pandemic are the most affected. Here's more from Ayana Carter.
The fifth round of the Caribbean Food Security and Livelihood Survey report, conducted by the World Food Programme and CARICOM, showed that many households in the region are unable to adequately provide food, energy, financial and other essential needs for their families. According to Food and Agriculture Sub-Regional Coordinator for the Caribbean, Renata Clark, people need to find smarter, efficient ways to produce food to ensure food security.
The cost of a healthy diet in the Caribbean is among the highest in the world. We cannot be thinking about short-term protectionism that puts local food on the market, but also raises prices for consumers.
Representative and Country Director for the World Food Programme, Regis Chapman, says 57% of people in the English-speaking Caribbean, which represents 4.1 million people, are estimated to be food insecure, a 20% increase over a 6-month period.
And while there are significant calls to change that dynamic, such as CARICOM's 25 by 25 initiative, which is reducing the food import bill by 25% by the year 2025, the situation really warrants an urgent need to finally prioritize that reduction of imports.
And CARICOM Assistant Secretary General Joseph Cox notes that despite government's awareness of inflation and measures to keep the prices of goods and services low, there's only so much that can be done on that level.
The survey results that have been presented today, along with the realities highlighting simply cement the need for the region to reinvigorate its efforts and engage in new solutions to help the vulnerable groups and those living in poverty within the region.
He says urgent response is required and is calling on both governments and private sector to work together to improve the region's food security outcomes.
Innovating in the tourism space seemed to be a focal area for the Tourism Authority in St. Kitts, as tourism officials are calling for innovation. Glenn Bart reports.
Ellison Tommy Thompson, the CEO of the St. Kitts Tourism Authority, believes generating growth now requires greater inclusion for authentic experiences for visitors at all levels of the tourism product. Thompson was responding to an SKN Newsline query regarding the nature of tourism innovation, of which the officials spoke.
In terms of innovation, there are two aspects of that. One is to make sure that the product offerings in St. Kitts are new, fresh, and innovative. So we're having internal discussions about what we as the Tourism Authority and the Ministry of Tourism can work on in conjunction with the private sector to make that happen. When in the minister's speech, she talked about the authentic Kittitian experience, I think this is where we want to concentrate on how we can put together a program or an experience where that comes to life. And that also brings in the aspect of community-based tourism, where we're able then to get the community involved in what we're doing. It's not for, the idea is for us to generate new experiences, but also to make sure that the wealth from tourism is generated through the economy and to the more rural areas in terms of that. When we look at the new advertising campaign, we're incorporating a lot of the Kittitian element in terms of the beauty, the topography of St. Kitts. But what we're also doing is not only just the ad, but we're also putting together social content where we've got kitchens telling their story. So the ad brings you to our website where you can get a deeper experience, where the story of St. Kitts and what's available in St. Kitts is told by kitchens. And we think what we put together is very powerful. It draws you in to make you want to learn more about what's going on in the destination.
Meanwhile, tourism officials have been conducting exit surveys to gauge the level of satisfaction among visitors.
Cayman Islands Minister of Tourism, Kenneth Bryan, has been elected as the new chairman of the Barbados-based Caribbean Tourism Organization. And his first order of business is likely to be a response for the region to market itself as a single destination. Bryan replaces Barbados Tourism Minister Lisa Cummins in the position for the next 2 years, acknowledging that there needs to be some reform and restructuring, particularly in respect to air travel and marketing. Barbados Prime Minister Mia Mottley on Wednesday made an impassioned plea for the United States to reverse its decision regarding correspondent banking in the Caribbean, telling U.S. legislators not to allow this to be recorded as unconscious bias.
Look at the list of countries who are listed, and you see that they're almost all former colonies and people of color. And look at the countries who, in spite of being able to open a bank account within hours in Delaware or Wyoming, within hours in Luxembourg or Zurich, and they remain off of these lists that speak about the risk to money laundering, and look and see where the divide comes. I believe that this committee has a keen eye for fairness and equity. And all we ask today is for a level playing field. The final solution, we believe, one of the solutions we leave you with, is that the Treasury ought to be truthful to its mandate. It says that it wants to be risk sensitive. Well, if it wants to be risk sensitive, then it needs to focus on where the money is, rather than creating rules that act as a proxy to money laundering or terrorism financing.
Prime Minister Mottley was testifying before the United States House of Representatives Committee on Financial Services. She was flanked by several Caribbean community prime ministers. In international news, Queen Elizabeth II's passing will change some aspects of everyday life in the UK and countries where she was head of state. King Charles III's image will replace hers on stamps and currency, and the national anthem will need to be reworded.
Hers was a long reign, and many marking her death say Queen Elizabeth II was a constant in their lives. In the Church of England, prayers are said every day for the monarch.
O Lord, show thy mercy upon us, and grant us thy salvation. O Lord, save the King, and mercifully hear us when we call upon thee.
And while the sentiment remains, the words have changed.
It is a seamless change. The prayers are for the sovereign, for the Queen, and now for the King, King Charles. Because we remember that the sovereign is the supreme governor of the Church of England. The Church of England has a particular role. In due time, God willing, the Church will crown and anoint the new King.
The past week has seen rituals stretching back centuries being played out. But in many ways, the British Queen silently permeated areas of everyday life here, and in countries where she was head of state. Money bearing her image will be phased out over a number of years and replaced by that of her son, King Charles III. Anyone under the age of 70 in the UK has only known postage stamps with the Queen's picture on them. For 7 decades, they chronicled her life.
It's not going to be an immediate change, it'll be a gradual change. Her late Majesty, the Queen, approved the stamps for the next 2 or 3 issues, and later this month we have an issue for the Royal Marines. Then we've got another issue coming up for the treasures of Tutankhamun. I think we'll just have to wait and see what the new King decides, and that will be exciting for us all.
There will be other changes too. One theatre in London is expected to alter its name from her to His Majesty's Theatre. The royal cipher on uniforms worn by officials and on royal documents will be replaced. Even at court, the highest lawyers in the land have changed their name from Queen's to King's Counsel.
And the other day, I think I signed the first letter, a formal letter about something, and I thought, oh, I better use Casey. Other than that, there is no formal difference.
Many of these changes are symbolic, but they do very much represent a changing of the guard.
In sports, the Cricket West Indies selection panel has announced the West Indies squad for the upcoming International Cricket Council's Men's T20 World Cup, which will be played in Australia from October 16 to November 13.
The two-time champions campaign begins on October 17 when they take on Scotland in the first of three Group B fixtures played at the Belrive Oval in Hobart, Tasmania, to qualify for the Super 12 phase of the tournament. Nicholas Pooran leads the 15-man squad in his first World Cup as captain, with Rovman Powell as vice-captain. The full squad includes Nicholas Pooran, captain, Rovman Powell, vice-captain, Yannick Correa, Johnson Charles, Sheldon Cottrell, Shimron Hetmeyer, Jason Holder, Akil Hussain, Alzari Joseph, Brandon King, Evan Lewis, Kyle Mayers, Obed McCoy, Raymond Rifa, and Odian Smith.
The Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee and Trinidad and Tobago Commonwealth Games Association has paid out its medal bonuses for the 2022 Birmingham Commonwealth Games that amounted to over $100,000 for the 6 medals won. That's it for the news on PBCJ. I am Simone Absalom Gale. You can follow us on our social media platforms at PBCJamaica. Thanks so much for watching.